You may not fully grasp the immense power behind your name, but let me assure you, it is not just a name. It is a force, a spiritual presence that carries with it an undeniable energy. The essence of your being is woven into the very fabric of existence, and when the universe speaks of you, it speaks with reverence. Your name is not a mere label. It is a crown, an unshakable legacy that commands respect, regardless of who you are, where you stand, or what the world may try to impose upon you. You, the chosen one, were not chosen by accident. Your path was written in the stars, your purpose deeply rooted in the very core of the universe. The weight of your name is carried not just in the physical world, but in the unseen realms, those spiritual domains where time and space bend and twist, where energy moves with a power no human can fully understand. This weight is not something you can simply shed or abandon. It follows you whether you acknowledge it or not. While others may rely on earthly connections, influence, or power, you possess something far more profound, a connection to a higher force that transcends human limitations. Your name is sacred, and it resonates with the divine power that courses through you. There are those who will never understand this. They see you as just another person, another name, another face in the crowd, but they are gravely mistaken. For when your name is spoken, it is not just a sound, it is the reverberation of the universe itself. It is an echo that calls forth cosmic forces, aligning the world with your essence. There are those who believe they can manipulate, control, or overshadow you. They think they can outmaneuver your path with their human-made schemes, but they will soon learn the price of underestimating the weight of your name. Because when the world tries to break you, it is not your name that will shatter, it is theirs. When you step forward, it is not with hesitation or doubt. It is with the full knowledge that the power of your name moves through you, undeterred, unwavering, and unstoppable. Setting the scene, the witch and her illusions. There is a woman, a witch, who believed she was untouchable. She had spent her life surrounded by those who promised her safety, those who shielded her from the consequences of her reckless actions. She came to trust that no matter how far she pushed the limits, there would always be someone to protect her. A powerful family took her in, offering her the illusion of security, providing her with everything she could need, and in return, she gave them her loyalty. To her, their influence was like an invisible cloak, covering her every move, hiding the consequences of her mistakes from the eyes of the world. For years, she had relied on their protection, a silent understanding that if she fell, they would catch her. When she made bad decisions, they smoothed things over. When her actions threatened to expose her, they whispered in the right ears, pulling strings to make the problems disappear. They had become her safety net, the foundation on which she stood. She was reckless, impulsive, and bold because she believed the protection would never fail her. In the depths of her confidence, she failed to recognize the fragility of the system she relied on. She believed it would never crumble, never betray her. After all, she had seen it work countless times before. But the truth was, she had built her life on an illusion, one that had no solid foundation. This illusion was sustained by the idea that her actions were inconsequential, that the consequences of her decisions were easily managed by those in power. She never questioned it, never thought to consider what might happen if the fabric of her world was torn. But she would soon learn that all illusions must eventually face the truth. She had become blinded by her own reliance on others, too comfortable in her position to see the spiritual force moving just beyond the veil. She was about to encounter a power far beyond her understanding, and when she did, everything she believed in would come crashing down. She thought she was untouchable, but she was about to discover the limits of human power. The betrayal, a favor that will change everything. The witch was offered a favor, a small favor, she believed. A simple request that would seal her place with the powerful family she had come to depend on. She never paused to consider the consequences. She saw it as nothing more than a task, a routine favor, one that would earn her more trust, more security. After all, her family had always had her back, and she had always delivered for them. This time would be no different, she thought. The task was simple: to access confidential information about the chosen one. She was asked to look into their personal life, to gather whatever information she could find, and then to pass it along. To her, this was just data, nothing more than numbers and words on a screen. She had done similar things before, breaking rules when it was necessary to protect her interests, bending boundaries when it suited her needs. She never saw this as more than a transaction. She believed that her actions were inconsequential, that this was just another favor in a long list of favors she had already done. She didn't think about the person on the other side, the chosen one whose life she was tampering with. She didn't think about the sacredness of their identity, the protection that was woven into their name. What she didn't realize was that this favor was not just a simple favor, it was a violation of something sacred, something beyond human reach. When she typed in that name, when she accessed that private information, she crossed a line that should never have been crossed. She believed her family's influence would shield her from any consequences, that no one would find out, that everything would be covered up, just like it had been before. But what she failed to see was that she was dealing with a power far greater than any human influence. She was not just tampering with data, she was tampering with divine order, and the forces that govern the universe would not tolerate her actions. She handed over the information, thinking she was securing her place in their world. She believed that by doing this, she would strengthen her bonds, ensure that her position was safe, that she would always have someone watching over her. But she failed to understand that the universe does not work on human terms. The chosen one's name was not just a name. It was a crown, a force that could never be compromised. And the moment she leaked that information, she triggered something much bigger than herself, something that no family, no connection, and no influence could protect her from. Her fate was sealed. She had moved against a force that could not be swayed, and now she would face the consequences that would unravel everything she thought she knew about power, loyalty, and protection. As she believed she was out of harm's way, the universe was already gathering the pieces, preparing to deliver the justice that would right the scales. The witch was about to learn a lesson she would never forget. She had crossed a line that could not be undone, and soon the weight of her actions would be felt, not just in the physical world, but in every corner of existence. Underestimating the power of a chosen one, the witch, in her arrogance, never fully understood the magnitude of what she was dealing with. She thought she knew power. She thought she could manipulate situations, play people, and make things disappear with the right connections. To her, power was something that could be touched, controlled, and even traded, a commodity to be wielded and used as needed. But in her pursuit of influence, she failed to recognize something far greater. There was a power that transcended the human realm, a force she could not bend, control, or manipulate, no matter how hard she tried. This force was tied to the chosen one, whose name carried a weight that no earthly influence could diminish. The witch believed she was operating in a world of rules, where the right connections could protect her from anything, but she was blind to the invisible laws that governed the universe. The name of a chosen one is not just a title. It is an embodiment of divine authority, an anchor to something far beyond human comprehension. The witch thought the power lay in family influence, in bending the rules of society, in playing the game better than others. But she underestimated the true nature of power, its spiritual essence. She had no idea that the name of a chosen one holds a vibration that resonates through the very fabric of existence. It is a name tied to an ancient sacred order, a force of nature that can never be diminished. She thought she could move against the chosen one without repercussions, but what she didn't realize was that when you go up against a chosen one, you are not just defying a person. You are defying the cosmic forces that govern life itself. The witch's understanding of power was confined to the material world. She had no inkling of the divine protection that surrounded the chosen one, or the consequences of provoking such a force. It was a mistake that would soon cost her everything. The first signs of consequences. At first, it seemed like nothing had changed. The witch, secure in her belief that her actions were hidden behind layers of privilege, continued with her life, unbothered and confident. She thought she had gotten away with it, convinced that no one would trace the actions back to her. But the universe moves in ways that are far beyond human perception, and the first cracks in her illusion began to appear. The slightest shift in the air, a whisper in the ether, subtle signs that told a different story. What she didn't realize was that every action, every choice, leaves a mark. It was only a matter of time before those marks would catch up with her. The first sign of consequence was quiet but undeniable. Her connections, those people she had relied on for protection, began to pull away, slowly at first, as if they were distancing themselves from something dangerous, something that they could not ignore any longer. It was as if the web that had once secured her now began to unravel, piece by piece. Her actions, once invisible, began to surface, leaving traces, footprints, and ripples that no one could dismiss. The witch tried to convince herself that it was nothing, that everything was fine, that she had outsmarted the system as she had done so many times before. But she could feel it deep within her, the weight of the consequences building slowly, relentlessly. What she had done was no longer just a shadow. It was becoming a glaring reality, and there was nowhere left to hide. The spiritual fallout, cracks in the illusion. The cracks in the witch's carefully constructed illusion began to widen. As the spiritual forces that protected the chosen one began to mobilize, the witch felt a pressure she couldn't explain. It was as if the very air around her had shifted, as if her world, once secure and protected, had begun to collapse in on itself. The protections she once felt, those invisible shields forged by her powerful family, suddenly felt fragile, like they were made of glass, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. Her confidence faltered, replaced by a deep sense of dread. She tried to ignore it, tried to hold on to the illusion that everything would be fine, but the signs were undeniable. People who had once been loyal to her began to act differently, their words more cautious, their presence less reassuring. She could no longer call on the family she had relied on for so long. They were distancing themselves, slowly but surely, watching her every move with suspicion. The comfort she had once taken in her connections began to dissolve, and she was left to confront a harsh reality. She was alone. The spiritual forces that had once kept her safe now turned against her. Her betrayal had triggered something far greater than she could understand, a divine retribution that could not be ignored. As her connections slipped away, the universe began to tighten its grip on her. She could no longer hide behind the veil of influence. The cracks in her illusion deepened as the weight of her actions pressed down on her, and she began to realize that there was no escaping the consequences. What had started as a small betrayal now threatened to swallow her whole. The very system that had once shielded her was now conspiring against her, unraveling her every move, pulling at the threads of her deception. She had underestimated the power of the chosen one. And now, the universe was making sure she paid the price. The spiritual shift in the universe. As the witch's world began to collapse, a spiritual shift reverberated through the universe, a shift she could neither see nor fully comprehend. The chosen one, whose name she had dared to tarnish, was not just a person. They were a force, a conduit through which divine energy flowed, and every action against them set in motion a ripple effect that reached across the cosmos. What the witch had failed to understand was that her actions were not isolated events. They were part of a larger cosmic web, one that was intricately connected to divine order. When she moved against the chosen one, she moved against the very forces that govern the universe. She had unknowingly provoked a cosmic recalibration, a shift that would realign everything in its path. The universe does not tolerate imbalance, and when a wrong is committed against a chosen one, divine forces move swiftly to restore equilibrium. The witch had believed her actions would go unnoticed, that her manipulation of data and secrets could be hidden beneath the surface. But the spiritual laws that govern the universe are unyielding. and no action goes without consequence. As the spiritual shift began, the witch felt the weight of it all. It was as though the earth itself had grown heavier, as though the air around her had thickened with the force of divine justice. Her every move, her every step, was now being scrutinized by a power she could not escape. The energy she had once manipulated now turned against her, pulling her deeper into the web of her own deceit. The Chosen One's name, once a mere set of letters in the witch's mind, now reverberated through the universe like a mighty drum summoning forces that would undo the wrongs committed against them. The witch's betrayal had set in motion a cosmic sequence that no human power could alter. The spiritual shift was not something she could outrun or avoid. It was the restoration of balance, the return of order to a world disrupted by her actions. And as the forces of the universe began to realign, the witch was left to face the truth. She had underestimated the power of a chosen one, and now there was no escaping the divine retribution that was coming for her. Every thread she had woven in secrecy was being unraveled, and with each unraveling, she felt the grip of spiritual justice closing in, relentless and unyielding. The witch's realization, facing the truth. As the consequences of her actions began to unfold, the witch could no longer deny what was happening. The once comforting illusion of protection she had so firmly believed in had crumbled. She had trusted that her powerful family would shield her, that their influence would always prevail. But now, as the world around her shifted, she understood something far deeper. She had made a fatal mistake. The truth was closing in on her, and for the first time in her life, she felt exposed, vulnerable and powerless. The truth was not just a personal revelation, it was the awakening of the universe itself. Every step she had taken to conceal her actions, to manipulate the system, was now unraveling before her eyes. What she thought was hidden in the shadows was now being brought into the light. She had underestimated the depth of the forces she was playing with. The weight of her betrayal was no longer a distant concern. It was standing right in front of her, undeniable and inescapable. Her once firm belief in her invincibility now seemed foolish, a childish illusion crafted from overconfidence. She had walked through life thinking she was untouchable, that no matter what happened, she would always be protected by the invisible shields of influence and power. But now those shields had disappeared, leaving her exposed and vulnerable to a greater force that could not be swayed by human manipulation. The witch had been living in a world of false security, a world where she thought her actions had no real consequences. But now she was face to face with the truth. She had crossed a line and there was no going back. This was not just a simple mistake. This was a cosmic misstep, one that had set in motion a chain of events that could not be undone. The weight of this truth hit her with the full force of divine realization. She could no longer run from what she had done. The universe was delivering its judgment, and she would have to face the consequences, no excuses, no escape. The fall, losing everything. The witch's fall was swift, but it was not sudden. It had been set in motion the moment she decided to betray the Chosen One. Every wrong move she had made, every moment of overconfidence, had led her to this point. As her world crumbled, she felt a cold emptiness spread through her. The family that had once shielded her, the powerful connections she had relied on, all began to disappear. At first, it was subtle, ignored messages, unanswered calls, the quiet withdrawal of the people she thought would always have her back. But soon, it became glaringly obvious. She was alone. The walls she had built around herself, the protective layers of influence and power, were now falling away. She watched in horror as everything she had once held dear slipped through her fingers. Her career, which she had taken for granted, was now in jeopardy. The job that once seemed secure was now hanging by a thread. No company wanted to be associated with someone under criminal investigation, especially not for something as serious as a data breach. She had become a liability, and the very people who had once vied for her favor were now distancing themselves, trying to save their own skins. Her reputation, carefully built on the foundation of manipulation and influence, now lay in ruins. And worse, she could feel the weight of her past mistakes creeping up on her, resurfacing in the wake of her betrayal. Her name, once a tool for power, was now the anchor dragging her down into the depths of legal and spiritual consequences. The very family that had once protected her saw her as a liability. They could no longer afford to cover up her mistakes, especially not when federal law was involved. Her world had turned against her, and there was no place to hide. She thought she was secure, but now she was exposed in ways she never imagined possible. The connections that once seemed so strong had dissolved, and the fortress she had relied on for so long had been dismantled. She had nothing left. The fall was not just physical, it was spiritual, emotional, and psychological. She had lost everything, not just in the material world, but in the very essence of her being. The witch was left standing in the ruins of her life, confronted by the harsh reality that the price of betrayal was far steeper than she could have ever imagined. The lessons learned, a spiritual awakening. As the witch stood amidst the wreckage of her life, something profound began to shift within her. The weight of her actions, the consequences that had once seemed distant and abstract, were now a part of her reality. She could no longer escape the truth of what she had done. But in this moment of despair, a strange clarity began to emerge. She realized for the first time that she had been living in a world of illusions. She had thought she understood power, had believed that influence was the ultimate force that could shape her world. But she had been wrong. True power, the kind that could not be manipulated or controlled, came from something much deeper, something beyond human influence. It came from a connection to the divine, from an understanding that the universe operates on a level far beyond the physical realm. In this moment of spiritual awakening, the witch saw her life in a new light. She understood that the power she had sought to exploit, those human connections and familial influences, were fleeting, fragile, and ultimately meaningless in the face of divine will. The forces she had defied were not just physical laws or societal rules. They were spiritual truths that could not be ignored or manipulated. The chosen one's name, which she had tried to tarnish, was not just a label. It was a force of divine justice, an embodiment of something far greater than any earthly connection. She had learned the hard way that when you move against a chosen one, you are not just battling a person. You are battling divine order itself, a force that cannot be swayed, a law that cannot be broken. The witch's awakening was painful, but necessary. She began to understand that her life, her choices, her very existence were part of a much larger spiritual plan. She had been blinded by her desire for approval, by her need to feel powerful and secure. But now, in the aftermath of her fall, she saw clearly, true power does not come from control or influence. It comes from alignment with the divine. It comes from understanding that we are all part of a greater cosmic order, and when we act in accordance with that order, we tap into a force that can never be diminished. The witch had learned this lesson the hard way, but she had learned it nonetheless. Her spiritual awakening had opened her eyes to the reality that power, in its truest form, comes from humility, from understanding that we are not the masters of the universe, but rather that we are guided by a force far greater than ourselves. Stepping into your divine power, the witch's journey was one of destruction, but also of profound awakening. As she stood on the edge of her shattered world, she was confronted by the truth. She had spent her life seeking power in all the wrong places. She had thought that control, manipulation, and influence were the keys to success, but she had overlooked the most important truth of all, the divine power that resides within us all. The moment she betrayed the chosen one, she set in motion a cosmic lesson, one that would resonate through the fabric of existence. And now, standing in the ruins of her life, she had the opportunity to rebuild, this time, from a place of true understanding. For the chosen ones, this lesson is critical. You carry within you a divine power that cannot be measured by human standards. Your name, your essence, is a force that commands respect, not because of your social standing or your connections, but because of the divine purpose woven into your being. When you step into your true power, you are aligning yourself with forces far greater than any earthly power. You are no longer bound by the limitations of the material world. You are walking in alignment with divine order, and when you do so, nothing can stand in your way. The witch's story is a reminder of the consequences of underestimating the power that lies within the chosen ones. Your power is not something to be taken lightly, and when you stand in your truth, you are protected by forces that no human influence can sway. It is time for you to step into your divine power. It is time for you to understand that the world is not as it seems. Your name, your essence, is more powerful than you could ever imagine. Embrace it, stand firm in your truth, and remember, when you walk in alignment with the divine, there is nothing, no force, no individual that can bring you down. Your power is unstoppable, your purpose is undeniable, and your name is your crown. Wear it with pride, for it is not just a label, it is a force of divine authority. Now, it's time to step into that power and claim your destiny.